Hi, if you are struggling with sleep during your menopause, then this is the video for you. This is the second video in this pair, and it's all about the deeper, more advanced information around sleep. In the last video, we gave you the basic information and what you can do today to help you get better sleep, because sleep is a massive issue during menopause. And today I'm joined by the amazing Clarissa Kristjansson. She's a menopause coach and mentor, and she works with women on stress and mindfulness. And she's an expert in her field, as well as being all-round fantastic. Hello, Clarissa.
Hello, Kate. Nice to be back on sleep again.
Right, fantastic. So, Clarissa, why should women really be concerned about sleep deprivation, other than it just makes you feel terrible? Why is it such a big issue, and what are we not really being aware of when we're talking about sleep deprivation?
Good question. That's a great question, Kate. Because we often think, oh, I want to get sleep because I don't want to be tired or moody. But sleep is vital for our body to function well. And especially as we age, as post-menopausal women, which is women like me, we are much more, and you too, we are much more at risk of really quite debilitating conditions. I'm not saying that it's a one-on-one, but we are at higher risk for osteoporosis. We are at higher risk of heart disease, and we're also at higher risk of dementia. And those are some of the things that sleep or lack of sleep can play into. Because the things that go on when we sleep is that your body gets a chance to reset itself. It gets a chance for growth hormone to be produced, which is obviously important for our bone formation. We get a chance for the brain gunk that's up there from all the thoughts we've had in the day to be cleared out. It gives a chance for inflammatory processes to, be managed in the body, and inflammation is a huge issue. And it's just generally good for our heart as well. We get so much cellular renewal when we sleep. So if we're not getting sleep, some of those things are not happening in the body, and that can flow through to long-term health. And there's so much research and evidence that if we're not getting the right amount of sleep, which is sort of roughly around that 7 to 8 hours a night, we are at greater risk. And so we should be taking it seriously as women, because of the estrogen depletion in our bodies and the role that estrogen also plays in those factors of dementia, those issues and risks of dementia, of osteoporosis, and of heart disease, because we just are at a disadvantage compared to men as we age.
Absolutely. And I think that we don't talk about that anywhere near enough. We don't talk about how osteoporosis is a silent killer, really, and it is highly detrimental on your quality of life. And we don't talk about that until it's too late, because when it's actually starting to show its signs, then it's way too late, realistically. We don't talk about heart disease and its prevalence amongst women, and the fact that in our post-menopause, it is a female disease. In fact, we're at greater risk than men. And we just wander through life thinking that it's a male disease and we're protected. And that isn't the case.
No. Number one killer of women worldwide. And I read a stat that was shocking, that women are twice as likely to die within 12 months of having a heart attack compared to a man.
Oh my goodness.
Doesn't mean you will, but the risk, and I just was like, holy moly, I'm going to do everything I can to look after my heart health.
And I think because of that, we are making poor choices around the outside that influence that. And I think the last point on Alzheimer's, we are 2 to 1, so 2 women to every 1 man will get Alzheimer's and dementia as we age. And there's not enough research being done on it, but the research does show that estrogen may well play a major part in that, or at least the deficiency of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the problem is that there are so many myths around this, aren't there?
There are, and I think we have myths. Some of the myths, ones that bug me is, and I said that earlier, you can catch up on your sleep. Never mind, I haven't slept all week, I'll have a lie-in on the weekend. And that's just not really true. Our body needs regular sleep. It needs the same kind of sleep, preferably at the same time if we can. This going to bed at 10 o'clock or earlier isn't a bad thing. We don't want to have too much sleep either. I think if you're starting to sleep 10, 12 hours, you should be asking, if something else is going on, and particularly around your mental health, because people who suffer with depression can often, these people who end up sleeping 12 plus hours, and there's something not right either, or maybe there's something else you need to get checked out. So I would say you want those 7 to 9 hours and really work on those. So there is no catching up. That's a big myth. There's also a myth that you need less sleep as you get older. That isn't true. There isn't actually an evidence to that. We sleep differently, but even if you were 80, you still should be aiming for 7 to 8, but we sleep more lightly. So the patterns of a person that's a bit older tends to be, we have less of the deep sleep, but not overall less sleep.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a big one when I was growing up, that my parents said, we don't need as much sleep as you get older. And that's, as you've just said, that's a myth. That's not a reality.
That's a myth. That's a myth. It's also a myth that it's bad to wake up in the middle of the night. In fact, we do that lots of times. I had a client who said to me, well, I'm not getting enough sleep because I've woken up 8 times in the night. And I went, but were you consciously aware that happened? Well, no. And I said, well, that's perfectly normal that we sleep and we have little moments of being awake in the middle of the night. But if we're not wide awake and, sitting wide up and doing things, that's just how we are. I mean, we've got a cavewoman body, and they would have slept like that because, well, they would have been aware of wild animals or something like that. So, we're waking up a few times during the night. We don't need to get panicked about that. We don't want to be waking up and being awake for hours and not able to go back to sleep. But otherwise, that's just a myth. And I think the other myth is that you can fix these by weighted blankets and wafting oils. They're nice, but they're actually not the way to rewire your brain to sleep well.
So on that point, we discussed in the first video about emptying your mind and the sort of approach, your psychological approach to sleep. And I know you do a lot of work around this. So Clarissa, what are the things that we can do as far as our mind, our psychological state to help us sleep?
One of the best things to do is to actually start by accepting that you can't sleep very well. Some of our biggest mental struggles are our own inner stories that are telling us, I can't sleep, there's something wrong with me. And that in itself becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So acceptance commitment therapy is a very good approach to help people to sleep. And quite often you hear cognitive behavioral therapies being used as well. I mean, ACT is obviously an extension of that, but they tend to work on specific issue, the specific issue, like you can't sleep because of. Yeah. Because ACT says, let's start from the premise that I can't sleep. Okay, I'm going to accept that that's my start point. And then I'm going to learn to practice mindfulness-based practices initially through the day to help me to relax, to be present, to learn to unwind, and then I can gradually bring those into the nighttime rather than let's just start in the nighttime and try and fix ourselves. Let's learn those processes. And I've worked with people who hadn't slept for 16 years and things like that properly. I actually had somebody, she was a high-level athlete, and she hadn't slept properly for those many years. And eventually she could, by practicing these very focused techniques that started in the day and we took them into the night, when we couldn't sleep, we didn't get up and put on lights and things like that. We just kind of lay there and was like, well, I'm okay with this. Nothing is really wrong. And just relaxing. And eventually she learned through various techniques to be able to sleep. Breathing techniques can be very helpful too. But I often try to get people to also let go of props. It's very easy to replace I can't sleep with I must do a yoga practice and I must do this meditation. They can be helpful, but ultimately we want to be able to fall asleep naturally and know that that's okay. And then if we go off the rails, we have some tools and techniques to come back, because we can do that. And that's very much how I work with people. It's a very different way, which was to learn, but it's very, very effective as a mechanism to learn to sleep long term, if we then combine that with the lifestyle factors that are supportive, which we talked about in the first video.
So it's about learning those skills, isn't it? So them actually not being like, oh my goodness, I can't sleep, quick, what did they say? Right, okay, let's do this mindfulness technique. And then, oh my God, it's not working, I can't get to sleep, I still can't get to sleep, it's really awful. And that's it for the rest of the night. So I know that I've spoken to women who definitely go through that process, and I know I did, but I like the fact that they are activities or processes that you learn during the day that you become a master of, so that by the time you need them in the evening, it's part of your muscle memory, really. You just know how to do it.
Exactly. And you're taking a lot of that pressure points, you're giving yourself releasing a bit of that. And then, as I said, with that particular person, we uncovered that, she'd had a major knee operation. We talked about pain, and of course, she'd never acknowledged that before. So there was another underlying problem. That didn't come out until we'd worked together for several weeks. So quite often, I coach people over a 5 to 6 week program, and every week they get exercises to do until we begin to see where the real issues are, because it's when we go a little deeper and examine ourselves as well and what's happening, and we learn some techniques, that we sometimes get to what's the underlying cause, which can sometimes be our perimenopause symptoms themselves, and sometimes there's something else that's going on in our head, and then we can address those. We're saying, well, maybe you're extremely anxious about your child or something, but you haven't ever expressed that. And then we can talk about that. We can talk about how we might meet that, rather than trying to force an unnatural sleep process onto us too early.
Yeah, and I think that, and we're going to talk about stress in the next 2 videos, but I think that stress around family members, around work, around the symptoms in general, let alone life around the outside of them, can definitely impact our ability to sleep, and our ability to even sort of settle in that sleep space, really. So I think we need to be aware that there is a joined up nature to this. This isn't in isolation. Sleep very much it's part of the process of your life. It's like, okay, it's not the end of the day. It's the end of the day, right? I'm going to go to bed and then I'm going to go to sleep. And that kind of delineation is where things start to actually go wrong, which is why the learning of things during the day and then being able to sort of seamlessly draw them into the night is so successful, because sleep is just another part of the day. It's not separate, it's not different. It is, if you've got anxiety and stress and other issues and pain going on in your life, they don't suddenly stay outside the bedroom. They come with you, and that's why they impact all of your sleep as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's we spend 1/3 of our life asleep. So it's a pretty important part of our life. And you're right, Kate, it isn't something separate. And everything that's happened in your day will flow through to what happens at night. And then again, as you said, when we don't have a good night, we don't have a good day. So we have to think of ourselves in that joined up sense that this is part of living, and it's part of something we have to learn to manage better through our own efforts. And at times we need more support. And there are no quick wins. You don't sort of suddenly go, well, I bought this stuff and it works, because they rarely sustain. And I'm big on sustaining the ability to sleep rather than a quick fix. And sometimes these things can happen. You can get a good quick fix. Maybe something you do works, but it doesn't, because you've not embedded and changed yourself. You're not rewired in here and changed your lifestyle. So it's likely that after a few weeks, you'll be disappointed. And you see that a lot, saying, well, I bought these weighted blankets, they don't work for me. And you're saying, well, what else did you do? Well, nothing. Then I'm like, well, that's probably why, because it's part of your life.
Yeah, I've never tried weighted blankets, but I would feel a bit anxious under a weighted blanket. I know that for myself. But yeah, so if there was like one or two mindfulness techniques that women could do quickly and easily, or start to think about doing in the day, that they could then bring into their nighttime sort of routine, what would you suggest, Clarissa?
One of my favorite techniques is called stop. And it's just that you literally do that. You stop and you really just check in with your body from the top of your head to your toes, or from your toes to your head, whichever way works for you. But you have a quick check-in. How do I feel? How am I breathing? Where am I holding tension? You know, and just that pause. It doesn't have to be more than a couple of minutes. You just checked in, and then you can go on with your day. So you're starting to build a bit of an awareness of yourself. And that for me is the first part. And you're giving yourself a break, a tiny little break to just be. And then you can take that. You don't want to be complicated and start doing complicated, because they're too difficult in the first instances. Just do simple stopping, checking in, getting to know yourself, and then moving on.
Fantastic. Right. Okay. So I think that's a really good place to stop as far as sleep is concerned, because quite frankly, we could talk about this all day. There are so many, excuse me, there are so many things that you can do to help you get through this. But it's important to note that if you are suffering with sleep deprivation for whatever reason during menopause, you are not the only woman who is experiencing this. This is an extremely common symptom. And there are people out there, just like Clarissa and myself, who are here to help. And it's not something to suffer in silence. So it's important that you view this as something that you do have control over. But as Clarissa says, this is not a one-stop shop. It's not something to just go out and buy a crutch. So the weighted blankets, the magnesium, although I love it, or any of the other things that are out there. This is about a lifestyle change to ensure that you support yourself throughout your menopause, because there are very, very important reasons why we should do that. So the next video is all about stress. Now, stress is a serious issue during menopause. So if that's something that you are suffering with, or that you would like help with, or you'd like to support your partner through, then absolutely ensure that you subscribe. Please leave a message. We'd love to know your thoughts around about sleep, and we will see you soon.